Jesus walks on water. In Mark chapter 6, verses 45, it says, immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side, to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. Now, to give you some context, Jesus has now just finished feeding the 5,000. Jesus has just done the impossible. Jesus has fed the mouths of 5,000 people with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 pieces of fish. And as soon as he's done feeding the 5,000, he tells his disciples to go to Bethsaida. These are Jesus's instructions. He tells them, go. See, what you have to understand is that Jesus is very intentional. Jesus didn't tell them to go to Bethsaida for no reason. There was a purpose and a plan behind it all. See, in order to understand why Jesus sent his disciples to Bethsaida, you have to go further down in the chapter. For in Mark chapter 6, verses 52, it says, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. Jesus has now just fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. But Jesus knows that his disciples' hearts are still hardened. They still don't understand who Jesus is. They still don't understand the purpose that they serve. They truly are just not getting it. Jesus is realizing that something did not click in their minds. They saw miracle after miracle, but yet their hearts were still hardened. See, after Jesus had sent his disciples to Bethsaida, Jesus went up a mountain to pray. And after Jesus was done praying, he looked out and he saw that his disciples were heading towards a storm because the wind was against them. Jesus is literally watching his disciples head towards a storm. He doesn't cry out to them. He doesn't try to signal to them. He just allows them to keep heading towards the storm. See, Jesus understood that after he fed the 5,000, the hearts of his disciples were hardened, and Jesus needed to renew their hearts. Jesus needed to create in them a clean heart, a soft heart. And in order for that to happen, in order for them to receive that kind of transformation, they needed to go through a storm. See, there are many of us whose hearts have hardened. We've grown numb to our sin. We've grown blind to our ways. And the only way that God can move on our lives is by sending a storm. You are meant to learn from the storm. The storm is meant to show you where you are in your walk with God. The storm isn't sent to destroy you. The storm is sent to test you, to show you how much you really need God. You were not meant to weather the storm. You were not meant to wait out the storm. You were meant to be changed by it. The storm is where you find revelation. The storm is where you find mercy. The storm is where you find humility. The storm is where you find grace. The storm is where you find transformation. The storm is where you find faith. God doesn't send storms to destroy you. He only sends them to transform you. In Mark chapter 6, verses 48 through 50, it says, and he saw they were making headway painfully for the wind that was against them. And about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass them by, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. For they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Jesus had no intention of acknowledging his disciples. Jesus was ready to pass them by. See, I don't believe that Jesus would have allowed his disciples to perish in the storm. But what we have to understand is that when God sends us a storm, there are some of us who sit through the storm waiting for it to pass us by. We take the beating of the storm. We take the brutality of the storm. We take the harsh winds and the waves and the crashing rain. And we just sit there through the storm, waiting for it all to be over. See, but God specifically designed that storm in order for you to have an encounter with him. The storm wasn't meant to destroy you. The storm wasn't meant to punish you. The storm was meant to teach you. It was meant to reveal God's love for you. It was meant to reveal God's purpose and plan for your life. It was meant to transform you. But you allow those moments and those opportunities to pass you by when you try to weather the storm. You miss your encounter with God when you try to wait out the storm. And you leave the storm receiving absolutely nothing. No healing, no revelation, no wisdom, no grace, no mercy, no faith. Jesus was going to pass by his disciples in the middle of that storm. If they had watched as Jesus walked past them in the storm, not crying out, not saying a word, just allowing Jesus to pass them by, then they would have gained absolutely nothing from the storm. No revelation, no wisdom, no new faith, nothing. See, after the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they cried out to him, but they were also terrified because they thought Jesus was a ghost. But Jesus immediately responded and said, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. And see, it was the moment that Jesus had gotten into the boat with them that the winds had ceased and the waves had obeyed and the storm disappeared. The storm wasn't meant to destroy you. It was only meant to direct you in the direction of God. Stop trying to navigate through the storm on your own. Stop trying to wait for the storm to pass and for the skies to be cleared again. And don't try to hide from the storm, because the answers to your prayers are in that storm. Your healing is on the other side of that storm. Your revelation is on the other side of that storm. Your breakthrough is on the other side of that storm. Your freedom is on the other side of that storm. Mercy and grace is on the other side of that storm. Do not let the storm pass you by without an encounter with Jesus first. Because then, and only then, will you find everything you've been looking for.